We were right once again here at this show, and it's really not difficult to be right. All you have to do when it comes to Democrats, if they have two options, right? If there's a fork in the road, and Joe Biden and the Democrats can actually choose to be progressive and legislate for the people, or they can choose, to legislate for their corporate donors and listen to the Joe Manchin types. That's what's going to happen, right? Whenever there's a fork in the road, think about the minimum wage, right? Think about infrastructure. Think about the $2,000 checks. Any situation, give any situation. Which way does Joe Biden go? If there's a fork in the road, which way does he go? He goes towards Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema types. And why does he do that? Why does he do that? Because Joe Biden is a Democrat in name only, right? Joe Biden is truly conservative. Joe Biden is really a Republican. If you look at his record, forget about names and labels and what party he caucuses with, right? Look at his legislative record and you'll know where Joe Biden stands on the issues, okay? So once again, we were correct. And like I said, it's not hard to be correct on this because we all understand and know who Joe Biden is. So Axios reports Joe Manchin isn't the only Democratic senator concerned about raising the corporate tax rate to 28%, and it will likely land at 25%. Parties close to discussion tell Axios. So once again, we have this thing, and it's called the Ratchet effect, and I'll show you a tweet on that later in a sec here. But the corporate tax rate before Trump was 35%. 35%. It went down to 21%, because Trump and the Republicans, what they do is they extremely legislate for corporations. They're not even shy about it, right? So they're saying, we're going to slash taxes. We're going to do all these things to help corporations, which they did. Okay. That's the Republican Party. The Republican Party has always been like that. So, that's pretty much expected, right? So they slash it from 35% to 21%. What does Joe Biden do? Does Joe Biden bring it back to the 35% where it was before Trump? Does he do that? No, he wants to bring it to 28%. So that's where he's starting the negotiation. He's starting the negotiation at already 7 percentage points lower than what it was before Trump. So we're further to the right. We're legislating more conservatively than before Trump was there, right? So it's called the Ratchet effect, right? The Republicans run super far right, and what do the Democrats do? They follow them. They follow them to the right. So instead of actually going back to the 35% or something higher on corporations, so they actually pay taxes and don't just dodge taxes wholesale, which they pretty much do, which that tax burden then gets pushed on who? The consumers, right? And the people that actually pay their taxes. Instead of actually putting it back to 35% or something higher, what does Joe Biden do? He puts it to he says he wants to put it to 20%, and like we just saw from that Axios, it's actually going to probably end up somewhere around 25%, which is not even that much more than what it was under Trump. So this is how you get this ultra conservative, unfettered capitalist hellscape that we live in right now, because you have Democratic legislators, right? Save whatever the Republicans do. You have Democratic legislators that want to legislate like Republicans instead of legislating in a progressive fashion or a progressive manner. And why do they do that? Because they actually are Republicans. You have to remember this. Okay, so let me show you. This is what we call the Ratchet effect. And so I appreciate my man, good politic guy, Mac. This is the Ratchet effect right here. So the Ratchet effect. How you are being duped by the fake two-party system, right? So Republicans turn everything to the right. That's their job, right? Republicans are going to do what Republicans do. Turn everything to the right. And then the Democrats, instead of, just like with this corporate tax rate, which was 30, Mac points out was 35% 3 years ago, instead of going anywhere close to that, the Democrats block movement back to the left. So this is how you get to the point where we're in this literal conservative, ultra conservative, unfettered capitalist corporate state that we live in right now. Because as the Republicans keep going to the right, keep going to the right, what do the Democrats do? They follow them. And not only do they follow them, they actually block any movement back to the left. And then year after year, decade after decade, you get to the point where you can have someone like Joe Biden, who's been the most conservative Democrat in Congress for a long time. I mean, this guy was against busing in the 70s and 80s. He was for every major and minor crime bill. He said that himself. He said in his 94, 95 speech that this crime bill did everything but hang people for jaywalking. I mean, that's just ultra conservative, right? So he's been one of the most conservative Democrats, legislatively, probably in history. And you get to the point in 2021 where the country's at a fever pitch. People are thirsty, pleading, protesting, everything for progressive reform. And then you get someone like Joe Biden. So that's what happens, right? That's because of the Ratchet effect. Now, what happens as a result, right? What happens as a result of all these companies never paying any taxes? Well, let's start here. Because the consumer prices rise more than expected. This is from CNBC, pushed by 9.1% jump in gasoline. So the consumer price index, which basically measures, there's an index of the prices that consume that, like food, energy prices that, everyday people have to deal with, and it measures the inflation of those prices. So we can see here that prices have been jumping more than expected, which, makes sense because of all the money printing that's been going on. It's going to, when the money supply increases, and, when there's more money just out there in the market, prices are going to go up. I mean, that's just, it's basic economics. The Fed actually doesn't include everything in their CPI data, so it's usually higher. It's actually usually higher than what they report. So you see consumer prices shot higher in March, given a boost by a strong economic recovery in year-over-year comparisons to a time when COVID-19 pandemic was about to throttle the U.S. economy, right? And so, you see gasoline prices down here. Gasoline prices were the biggest contributor to the monthly gain, surging 9.1% in March and responsible for about half the overall CPI increase. Gasoline is up 22.5% from a year ago, part of a 13.2% increase in energy prices. Food nudged higher as well, up 0.1% for the month and 3.5% for the year. Okay, and then 5.4% in the category of meats, poultry, fish, and eggs. Okay, so we see that prices are rising, right? And if you're an ultra millionaire, 10, 20 millionaire, even 1 millionaire, 2 millionaire, 3 millionaire, you don't actually feel these prices increasing, right? Especially if you're not a billionaire. The more up the ladder you go, those small increases in prices doesn't really mean much for you. But if you're living off the $7.25 minimum wage that the Democrats refuse, even though they have complete control of government, refuse to increase. If you're living off that and you see a 3% 3% bump in food prices, 13% bump in energy prices, that's going to mean a lot for you. That's going to mean a lot for, what you have in your bank account, how far your dollar goes. So we say that's, it's decreasing your purchasing power. So, when these corporations die, and Biden said he was going to pay for this new infrastructure bill with increased corporate tax rate. Well, now that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So essentially, the money will be printed. It's not going to be paid for by the corporations. And so what's probably going to happen is more inflation is going to happen, right? These consumer prices are going to continue to go up. They're going to continue to go up. And who's going to feel that? Who's going to feel the increase in all those prices? It's going to be the person, like I said, working a minimum wage job, trying to balance having a family and paying rent and putting food on the table and keeping the lights on, keeping the energy going. So as these prices increase, despite what the Fed says, we want to control inflation here and there or whatever, we're actually seeing, right, the increase in these prices. People are actually feeling that right now. And so when you don't have, it's not paid for by corporations who we all know don't pay their fair share. And how do we know that? Let me actually bring this up. Here's a fact sheet. This is Americans for Tax Fairness. Key facts. like I said, the Americans for Tax Fairness, fact sheet, corporate tax rate. Corporate share, key facts. Corporate share of federal tax revenue has dropped by 2/3 in 60 years, from 32% in 1952 to 10% in 2013. So corporations actually used to pay 1/3 of all taxes in 1952. And then what do you have because of that ratchet effect? Because people like Reagan, people like Bill Clinton, et cetera, Obama, Bush, all these presidents, right? Now you get to the point where in 2013 it was 10%, and I guarantee you right now it's even less. I guarantee you right now it's even less. So these corporations making billions upon billions, tens of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars, and they're only paying 10% of all the taxes in this country. Here you see General Electric, Boeing, Verizon, and 23 other profitable Fortune 500 firms paid no federal income taxes from 2008 to 2012. I mean, U.S. corporations dodge $90 billion a year in income taxes by shifting profits to subsidiaries, often no more than post office boxes and tax havens. U.S. corporations officially hold $2.1 trillion in profits offshore, much of it in tax havens. And I'm not even sure when this article came out, but it's probably increased since then, and that would actually pay for the entire infrastructure package, wouldn't you know? So we know these corporations aren't paying their fair share in taxes. And in fact, recently this just came out as well. This was earlier in April. Dozens of America's biggest businesses paid no federal income tax again. 55 corporations had zero federal tax liability in 2020, including household names like Nike, FedEx, and Dish Network. Analysis finds. So year after year after year after year, they're not paying federal income tax. They're not paying it. They're just not paying taxes. While you're paying your full share of taxes, right, at threat of penalty, right, at threat of prosecution under federal law, you're paying your federal income tax. I'm paying my federal income tax. Everyone's paying their federal income tax, except the people making billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. They're not paying. And they're not going to be paying under Joe Biden's new plan. Because despite all that talk about the corporate tax rate, 21%, 25%, 35%, even when it was at 35%, in those years that we just saw, they weren't paying their taxes. They're not paying it. It's bankrupting the country. It's shifting the tax burden to all the people who don't actually have the money to pay for it, right? Who don't have the money, and 25, 30% of your income getting taxed, that means a lot for you and your family. They're not paying any federal taxes on billions and billions of dollars. That's so much money, a lot of us can't even fathom how much money that is. And they're making all that and not paying shit because we live in a corrupt society. They've bought the politicians. The politicians have written it into law that these companies can have all these write-offs and all these, all these amazing tax code that they can get around, that they don't end up having to pay taxes, which you can't do. Why? Because you don't have all these assets you can write off, like these companies, and unbelievable amounts of corruption written into the tax code, which allows legally a lot of these companies to get off without paying taxes. So that tax burden will then be shifted to the average Joe, right? And because Joe Biden won't be paying for his new infrastructure plan with something like a wealth tax, with actually closing all these loopholes that these corporations can take advantage of, actually make them pay their fair share of taxes, because that's not going to be happening, where is that tax burden going to fall? It's going to fall on the normal person. Now, it might not fall on the normal person in the sense of an increased federal tax rate for the normal person, right? The person making minimum wage, person making 40 to 50K. It's going to come in the form of inflation. You're going to see your purchasing power decreased, as has been happening recently, as I've showed you. You're going to see your purchasing power decreased. And when there's even more money flooded into the markets, though, that inflation will rise again. Once again, the billionaires won't really see a difference. In fact, all their assets are going to get inflated. They're going to be able to pay into these hedge funds to buy 5 or 6 properties. One of those being the middle class home that you will not be able to get anymore, because you have to have 100% to throw down in cash. Actually 120%. A lot of times it's 15-20% over asking price, all cash. You're going to be priced out of that home, but these billionaires who own these hedge funds, 100 millionaires who invest in these hedge funds, they're going to keep buying up all this property and keep making money. That's what's going to happen. So there are real world ramifications and consequences to what Joe Biden is doing, to how this country is being run, to the corruption of the Democrats. And we will all see it with decreased purchasing power. Your money's just not going to go as far. And then the little bit of money that you have, right? Because we know even before COVID, 40-50% of people living paycheck to paycheck, workers, and a lot of people can't afford $405 emergency. Well, that number is going to actually go down even further because Joe Biden doesn't plan on actually doing anything to make corporations finally pay their fair share. No, what is he going to do? Like the Ratchet effect teaches us, he's going to go further to the right, and he's only going to raise the corporate tax rate 3 or 4%, and he's not going to close these loopholes. So these companies, once again, will be paying nothing in federal income taxes.